Is he here?
I don't think so.
Come on, let's go. What happens if we push this button here?
No, don't
John Melly.
Buick's NCAA
He's gonna
March
kill
Madness
us.
event. Big deals for the big dance. Now through March 31st, there's big savings from GM, an official corporate champion of the NCAA. Guided by the values of financial strength, integrity, and humanity since 1845, New York Life is the company you keep.
Clouds. Big whoop. You see them every day. And most of the year, they don't mean much more than...
Should I bring the hibachi in? People, please. A little respect for our protector, huh? Okay, sure. Maybe he's a big chicken. And maybe his muscles are teeny tiny, teensy tiny. And yes, maybe I'd be a much better protector with my deep, commanding voice and rock-like abs.
This is submaronic drool-inducing swill.
How do we shut this off?
What are we gonna do?
Oh, no.
Let's make a big intro. Make it sound good. Make it sound good.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Boys and girls.
And dogs and cats of all kinds. Here he is, John
John
Melly.
Melly.
Yeah!
He's the bomb.
That was pretty good, don't you think?
I think you'll like it.
Hey there, it's John. How are you? This is episode 69. How have you been? It's been a while, I know it has. And I appreciate your patience. And if you are one of the first listeners to listen to this episode after my hiatus, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your loyalty and your interest, your continued interest and your patience. So I alluded, I don't know if you saw my post in Facebook on the Facebook group. I've been out of touch for a while. Won't go into specifics on too much, but I've had a lot of stuff going on in the background. For anyone curious or concerned, just so you know, I am healthy. I am fine. We've just got a lot of stuff going on in the background with my family, and we'll leave it at that. Also, I guess I'll have to admit I'm in middle age, my early 50s, and when that happens, certain life events start to happen, and the last 3-4 years have been tough in many ways with some personal losses. And last December, today's episode is a special episode in that I recorded this interview with Rob Berkley in June of 2017. And for whatever reason, it got banked for a while. I'm always curating content for the podcast. And shortly after our interview, Rob was diagnosed with cancer. And unfortunately, Rob passed away, not this past December, but last December. And Rob was a friend, a mentor, a coach, someone who I had about an 8-year business and friendly relationship with, mostly business. But Rob had a tremendous impact on my business and other aspects of my life. He encouraged me to go after passions that I set aside in my life, pursuing other things, my career, the different paths of my career. And he helped me rediscover passions of mine, such as music. I started playing the drums, participating more in nature and taking care of myself and being more active. And Rob and I continued to work together through his illness, through regular coaching calls, etc. And then in June of 2018, he let me know that we would be discontinuing our conversations until such time that he was able to resume. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And I had this content from Rob, and I wanted it to be the next episode of the podcast because we ironically recorded the interview after I was coming out of a funk. If you listen to a couple of the previous episodes prior to this, you'll hear me talking about that and what I was doing to get out of that and the things that we all go through in life. And this episode was for everyone, anyone who wants to listen to this podcast. It was on things that you can do when you're contemplating change and how to get out of a funk. And with all these other things going on, I got to tell you, I've had a lot of good things happening too. I've got a beautiful family. My wife is awesome. My parents are healthy. They had some things, and they're good, thankfully. And I've got beautiful nieces and nephews and siblings and in-laws. And Ann and I don't know if I told you, we adopted my brother Eric's dog, Zoe. She's a Beagle Jack Russell Terrier mix, and I never knew how much of a dog guy I am. I have fallen in love with this dog. She takes up a tremendous amount of my time, and I'm more than happy to give it to her. She is hysterical. I had no idea the passion I would have for an animal like this. It has opened up a whole new world of fun and exploration and discovery, and just really bonding with this animal in a way I had no idea was possible. It's one of the best experiences of my life, and I love that dog, Zoe. She is, she's awesome. She's awesome. I've got nothing better to say than that. And she's known around the neighborhood. She is queen of the hill. She guards our property assiduously. She doesn't like the mailman, but she tolerates him. And she gave him a jar of honey from our honeybee hive from our harvest this year, or this last fall. So I'm trying to count my blessings. But this interview, I edited our conversation in bits and pieces because... well, first of all, it was a long conversation, so I couldn't do it all in one setting. And it was kind of tough at times to go through the material. And in other ways, it was kind of cool because we had set it up separately as an interview, but it was almost like a bonus call. And he did it out of support for me and this podcast and my activities. I know if you listen to this, you will get stuff out of this. This will be one that you will want to listen to multiple times because there are a lot of gems in here. This one is one that you sit down with a beverage of your choice, coffee, tea, or later in the day, something maybe a little stronger, but not too strong because you want to really pay attention. Thanks for your patience and indulgence, and we're back at it stronger than ever. I got more stuff coming, but I wanted this episode to be the next episode. I would ask you to listen through all the way to the end, because at the very end of the episode, Rob does something that we all should be able to do for our business. And that is, he has a clear definition of why he does what he does, or why he did what he did. Stay all the way through to the end because you need to hear it in context. It's a long one, but it's so worth it. And I would offer to you that once you hear it, perhaps you could start to think about what it is that you do and what your mission is for your life's work. So let's get right to it. Rob, thank you. And this episode is dedicated to Rob Berkley. Well, welcome back. As I mentioned in the first part of the program, my guest today is Rob Berkley. Rob was a guest on this podcast, I think, within the first 10 episodes. It's been a few years, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Sure.
I remember that one. That was a terrific interview we had.
It's a very popular episode. We still get a number of downloads every month on that episode, and it was about having a vision for your business. And let me just tell you a little bit about Rob before we dive in on the questions that we're going to talk about today. Rob is my coach. I've been a client of yours for, 8 years now? Something like that.
Got to be around 8 years, maybe even more.
Yeah. So Rob is a master certified coach he's helped thousands of entrepreneurs, executives, and couples find their mission and strategic direction for what they want to do with their businesses, but also their personal lives. And Rob has a proven talent for facilitating personal and professional breakthroughs. One coaching client describes Rob as a cross between Yoda, Gandhi, and Perry Mason, which I'd love to see where that is all from. But he has wisdom, clarity, kindness, and a touch of the force, quote unquote, to his work. And I can attest to Rob, just really caring about his clients. I've experienced this firsthand with you. That's why I'm still a client of yours. But Rob's clients range from management consultancies, the Harvard Business School, McGraw-Hill, the TB Alliance, which is a Gates Foundation organization, and Inc. 500, 5,000 organizations, and a whole bunch of other good stuff. So rather than spend all day reading all of your voluminous credentials, let's just dive in. Thank you, Rob, for your time today.
You're so welcome. Thanks for that wonderful introduction.
Wasn't it great?
It was. You made my day.
Well,
You stumbled a little bit over the Perry Mason, Gandhi, and Yoda part.
Well, it's
what was it that was a little confusing for you?
It's an interesting juxtaposition. I mean, Yoda and Gandhi, I kind of get. It's the Perry Mason curveball that kind of threw me off. I'll admit, I'm looking at it on print here, but where does that come from? What aspect of this is the Perry Mason thing? Is it the questioning? Is it the bringing things to a conclusion and an obvious outcome, or what?
You know, it's so funny, John, and I had the same reaction the first time that gentleman who gave me the testimonial told me that. And he said the Perry Mason thing comes from the fact that I really get down to the heart of the matter really quickly and clear away the fog and have the ability to dig in and really find the truth through the questions and the focus. And when he said that, it made me feel really good because it's something that I try to do.
Yeah.
So that was the Perry Mason part. And the funny thing is, very few people nowadays have even seen Perry Mason.
Yeah, well, I have to admit I have. In reruns.
Me too.
But, The reason why I invited you back to the program is the last couple of episodes, I've been very candid with the audience of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast, and it's stuff that you've helped me with over the last few months, and where I basically admitted to everybody that I'd been going through a bit of a stuck period in my career and my business, and it's not because I didn't have other things going on. And the interesting thing is that the feedback I've received from folks is a lot of people told me that, yeah, we get that. We experienced it too. And a lot of people have told me that they had admired my candor and honesty and openness and things along those nature, which I found very touching. And actually had an email from someone who's going to be a guest on the program in the next couple of weeks who reached out and thanked me for episode 54, which was me pretty much coming clean with the fact that, you know what, I've been in a bit of a funk. So I wanted to talk to you about getting unstuck and things that you can do. And feel free to use our conversations as a point of reference if you'd like.
No, my pleasure. Well, it's a very big topic.
Yeah.
I always start off and think about like the reasons people do get stuck. And I actually, you know, when you told me what you were going to say on your podcast, I really endorsed that because in many ways when we struggle, and like everyone else, I have my stuck times too. And when we struggle and we share that with the people that we work with, it helps. And so sharing ourselves in service of the work makes a difference for others, which is why I know you do yours and certainly why I do mine. So, let's talk about what keeps us stuck, what holds us in place, what stops us from moving forward. And, one of the things that's really preeminent in this is lack of clarity. And this is what happens when people's goals are not crystal clear. To fix this is your goals need to be so clear and so well articulated on paper that somebody else can actually see if you've attained the goal. So it's not just a feeling, right? If I'm trying to get in shape, it's not that I'm trying to feel better. That'll be a side effect, but it's that I should be able to run a mile in a certain number of minutes. I should be able to lift a certain amount of weight or whatever that somebody else who's with me can actually see and measure for me. And, one of the things that you and I talked about when you were not moving forward as quickly as you wanted to, and one of the things also, John, is that you were moving. I've never known you not to be moving forward. It's just different rates. But and it's very true, and always forward. But the work in that moment for you and me was to work on your clarity. And you have a lot of big goals, and you're an inspired man, and you want to create a lot of stuff in the world. And so sometimes that can all get a little fuzzy. And when that happens, what we do is we want to scale it back, break it down into smaller steps, and even, if possible, turn it into some kind of a plan. So B follows A, C follows B, D follows C, etc. A plan that somebody can make step by step. So if you've got a clear destination and you've got step-by-step actions to take, it's very hard to stay stuck. Does that make sense?
Sure, it does.
Yeah.
We refer to my stuckness because I tend to overthink things. We've affectionately termed it as dreidling. You coined it because I kind of just spin in one place.
Right, exactly. So you kind of fall over and win the prize.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Maybe it's different for other folks. I don't know. Maybe you use that term with other clients and coaching people that you deal with. But
I've never used that before. It's yours.
All right. Well, I'm honored. Why did you choose that for me? And I'm not trying to let's talk about me now. But I mean, there's a reason you used that term, and I wonder if it's common to other folks.
Yeah. Well, what is common is that people get overwhelmed. And this is another thing that keeps people on their plateau. So people get overwhelmed. And this is really what was happening to you. You just had so many things that you wanted to do. And at the same time, I don't want to talk about very personal things that were going on in your life. But by saying that, of course, I've got everybody wondering.
Right.
Let's just say that you had a family member that you were helping out, and you were doing an amazing job, but it was taking a lot of time and energy. And
yeah, it's a fair way to put it.
Yeah, exactly. And you had objectives, you had the podcast, you had other programs you wanted to release, and you are very focused on being physically fit. And, you've got a wonderful program going there. Mm-hmm. You're working on your voiceover athlete stuff. So anybody that's listening to us right now is probably thinking to themselves, like, oh my goodness, how can this man do anything? There's so much going on. This is the kind of thing that leads to overwhelm. And the reason I coined the term dreidling just was so that you and I could have fun
right
in that moment. And it would give us an easy way to think about it. But it was time to have fun because it was getting really serious. And we needed to lighten it up a little bit. And then once we lightened it up a little bit, and this is what people can do to move forward when they get into overwhelm or they find themselves spinning around and around and not doing anything. The key thing here, and the reason it happens, is people no longer know what's the most important thing to do first.
That's a great way to put it. And as you're talking about how this all came about, my mind is going back to that time. And it's like you said, I said, okay, I've got this going on at home. I've got this going on with family. I've got this book that I'm working on. I've got the podcast that I want to keep doing. I've got the career thing that my vocation as a voice actor and audio production specialist. And then there's the fitness, and it's like you cycle through, okay, which do I go and which is next, which is next. And so where do I attack first? And obviously there's this stuff that you just have to do every day. But then with all this other stuff came in, it really knocks your eye off the ball, but you still have it in the back of your head as like, okay, I've got this stuff I want to get accomplished, but I don't know where to begin.
Exactly. I don't know where to begin. And the other thing was you had 15 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag.
Yeah.
And it's funny, but people do this all the time. And the idea is, what's the most important thing for me to do? What's the second most important thing for me to do? What's the third most important thing for me to do? And if you've got everything in order, then you're going to see that some things are just going to get cut off the bottom of the list, even if you really, really want to do them.
Yeah.
And so that's that's one of the reasons why that phenomenon happens. And then another reason that sometimes people get stuck like that is they don't know how to make decisions.
Okay.
Right? They don't have a tried and true framework for decision making. And then along with that is people treat all decisions with equal importance. So they'll spend the same amount of time picking out their milk, like is the milk going to be vitamin D milk from an organic farm, or is it going to be natural milk with no vitamin D? And they can agonize over these decisions. And the other one is, what's my podcast going to be about right now? Or am I going to work on my book, or am I going to go work out and keep my body limber, strong, and healthy? And so what happens is, one, decision fatigue. When you're making a lot of decisions, people just run out of energy to make decisions. And secondly is they don't treat all decisions with the same level of importance. Okay. And then third is they don't know how to make big, important decisions in a way that they're confident. I can go on for a whole day and talk about decision making, but the thing I would say for everybody that's on this call listening to us is, if you do not have a model for making good decisions, find a book and pick a model or two. There's a lot of books that are really, really good that can help you.
Do you have a couple of titles that you could just recommend? Or
I can never remember the titles of them, but they are, The Thinking Manager's Toolbox, Winning Decisions is another one. There's dozens of books on how to make decisions. And these are they're really important and they're helpful. But those two are two that I really like, and two that I very often recommend to the people I work with. But once you've got a decision-making process for big, hard, complicated decisions, things in your life get easier, because you know that you can routinely make these important decisions in a way that's going to give you a good result.
And that's in alignment with what your goals are.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. That's really important. Yeah. There's another book just came to me called The Decision Book. It's just a book, lots of different ways to make decisions. Those are 3 books. There are many, many more.
Right.
You can get very complicated with this, or keep it very simple. My whole thing is, find the decision-making process you like for the harder decisions and the bigger decisions. And then the smaller ones take care of themselves, but recognize them as small decisions.
Very good. Thank you for those recommendations. One of the things that I was feeling throughout this period of time, and we probably touched on it in our conversations, was this guilt of not getting stuff done. And that kind of weighs down on the decision-making process. What can you say about that feeling? And I think that all kind of gets mixed up in, what do I do first? And then, oh my gosh, I haven't done anything. I'm missing out, this kind of thing. I'm losing respect. I'm losing face. And, all these things that kind of get worked up into your head.
Right. Well, one of the things about you that is always inspiring is that you're an extremely motivated man. You've got a lot of things you want to accomplish. You work on a lot of things. You don't waste a lot of time. You've always got something going on. And that the guilt piece is, guilt always is a result of us violating a personal standard. So guilt is when we violate a personal standard. Oh. And your personal standard is to be very productive.
Yep.
And to continually make stuff happen. Well, if you're getting sidetracked by other things that you had to do, right?
Yeah.
The other things were not optional.
Right.
And you look at your to-do list, you're still going to be in violation of your personal standards, so you're going to start to feel guilty.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, perfect sense, yeah.
And the other thing is, if you've only got so much time, it's that prioritization and the overwhelm thing. How can you say that just doing a podcast and working out and being a good husband and going to your regular 9-hour-a-day job is enough, when all these other things that you've got to do, right?
Yeah.
This is super, super important. But so for people that feel guilty, one is, I think, to feel good that you're so motivated and focused. 2, to realize that it's happening. It may not be able to be any other way. And then the last factor, sometimes what happens to people is they just plain get tired.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And we only have so many productive hours in a week. And if we're spending them stuck in traffic, we can't use them on our projects. If we're spending them taking care of our family, we can't use them on our projects. So there's always a trade-off. So the thing that needs to happen, and this is one of the reasons why our work together is helpful, is we put it all in perspective. That makes a big difference.
There's this thought running through the back of my head here, and I just want to make it clear to the audience is, we're just using this as a point of reference. And the reason I'm using these thoughts and emotions and things that I've shared in this episode, but also in other episodes, is that people reached out to me and said, you know what, I feel the same way at times. I totally get what you're saying. So I'm trying to be members of the audience and ask the questions that they may want to ask you while we have you here today. So that's the reason why we're doing that, because I don't know what other people are going through other than, specifically, but we can certainly talk about the human aspect of going through stuff and getting unstuck, right?
Right. I think it's fair. Look, if people hear this, what we speak about today will help them at some time in their life. I know that because I haven't run into too many people, myself included, who doesn't get stuck and doesn't feel like they're not making enough progress, or is wanting to get something done and it's just not happening, or feeling overwhelmed and exhausted and frustrated because things just aren't coming together. So I know that this discussion that we're having, and we've covered 4 or 5 really important topics so far that I believe will all be helpful. Mm-hmm. We're having this discussion is going to make a difference, and I really honor the fact that you are willing to be so transparent with your audience, and it's one of the many things I like about you, John.
Well, thank you, Rob. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend? Is there a certain amount of permission that a person has to give themselves to say, okay, this is where I'm at right now. I need to recharge? Or if you're overwhelmed and you're exhausted, when do you know when it's ready to say, okay, let's pick up where we left off and get started again?
Well, one is exhaustion is pretty easy to tell. But the thing that happens is people don't pay attention to it and force it through. So it's very helpful to ask a loved one or a friend how they experience you and get that feedback. So that's a good way to do it. And the other thing is if stuff just isn't happening, there's a set of questions to ask yourself. And one of them is, am I too tired to make it happen? Am I not rested? Mm-hmm. And one of the things I always think about when people are stuck and they tell me they're not motivated, they tell me they're struggling, they tell me that they're tired, the first thing I have them do is get a physical, because we always want to rule out the physical first. So especially if somebody has a dramatic change in their mood or a dramatic change in their energy, which I see a lot, then it's a good idea to go to the doctor and see what's going on. Is it, and I'm not a doctor, but these are some of the things. Is it thyroid? Is it low iron? Is it lacking B vitamins, B12 or whatever? Right. Poor sleep. So a sleeping issue. Bedroom isn't dark enough so that you don't really sleep. Too noisy. Watching too many stimulating things before going to bed. So all these things can contribute to being exhausted.
Yeah. And I have, just to kind of piggyback onto your thought there, I have really made a conscious effort in the last 4 or 5 months to really over the last year, but I found myself taking in too much information from various aspects of my life. I'm a voracious reader, both for my career, but also just outside. I love to learn things. I've got 4 or 5 books going at any time. But then there's, the things that you add into your life, like social media. And yes, it's a great marketing tool and all of that. But there's a lot of stuff in that I won't get too far into it, but I think a lot of these social media platforms have become very negative spaces for a whole host of reasons. But also between that and television, in terms of keeping up to date on what's happening in the world, there's no downtime. We've got instant access to information literally at our fingertips with smartphones. You're in the car, there's a car radio or whatever it is you're listening to in the car. And then you get home and there's a lot of noise, and I work in media, and a lot of, everybody listening to this podcast is involved in some way. But I remember where I had a moment where I was just like, I've got too much coming into my head. I got to stop. I've got to cut a lot of this stuff out and stop loading my mind with information. that decision fatigue you talked about. Do you find that with your clients as well? I mean, you see a broader spectrum than I do.
Yeah, thank you. This is another dimension that really clogs people up, which I call informational obesity.
I like it.
And so what happens is people are reading 4 or 5 books, which I endorse. They've got a steady news stream going, and it's impossible to digest it all. There's a constant, there's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or television going. And by themselves, these things aren't a problem. But all together, what happens is there's so much information coming in that people can't digest it. And it becomes like obesity. Their mental processing gets clogged up. And the other thing is, if there's something you really want to do in your life, it pays to narrow down a little bit and focus just on that subject matter for a while and work towards mastery.
Right.
And really dig in.
Right.
And, if people are reading a zillion different programs, and I have a lot of clients that do this, it's just gathering information for information's sake rather than gathering information to turn it into an outcome. Unless we do it on purpose, we want our information gathering to result in the ability to do something that we couldn't do before, to do something better, or to create something more efficiently or effectively or more beautifully than we could before. So all those things come together in our search for information. But if there's too much information, it just clogs us up and we get the equivalent of a mental muffin top.
I like that. I like that a lot. Everything, it does take a certain amount of energy to process it. Everything. I mean, even if it's somebody taking a picture of the cupcake that they are about to devour, even though you don't really care, you still have to make a decision. Yeah, I don't care about that. And that there is a cost to that. And the cumulative decisions on that level, I suppose this goes back to our decision-making process, that it can really take away energy from making the decisions to help you move forward in the direction that you want.
Yes. Well, should I put a few more thoughts on the table about why people get stuck?
Absolutely.
Okay. One is that there's something in your personal or their personal environment that's holding them back. And it's funny, a lot of people spend their whole days working on computers that stumble, that crash, that don't have enough memory, so they're always having to move their files around.
Mm-hmm.
I always think about that as their information factory. And if you're a knowledge worker, you've got an information factory, which is generally a computer. If your information factory is not fully functional, it's going to slow you down and keep you stuck. If your workspace isn't well suited for the work you need to do, it's going to slow you down and keep you stuck. So one of the questions to ask yourself right away is my environment holding me back in some way? And can I change it easily? So that's another one. Something else that slows people down and gets them stuck is they have emotional baggage that's derailing them. And these are things like limiting beliefs, traumas, unfinished business, and all of these things can hold people back. And the way to handle that really is to get professional support. And when I see that somebody is repeatedly committing to take an action and it's not happening, or they're suffering over what they want to do, then it's very often clear that it would be helpful for them to get some emotional support from a professional counselor that can help them dig in a little bit and see where the stuck spots are there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you have another one that you wanted to throw out there on the table?
I certainly do. I've had a whole ton of these.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, these are great because everybody's coming from a different place. So,
exactly.
It's a path of entry.
Right. The person might lack the ability to do what needs to be done quickly and effectively. And they can't, they don't have the wisdom, the knowledge, the experience, the physical ability, or they emotionally can't do what's needed. And so the question to ask yourself is, do I lack the ability to do what needs to be done here quickly and effectively? So it's funny, I was looking at one of the projects I'm working on that needed some Facebook advertising. Well, I was thinking to myself, okay, I'll just whip out a couple of Facebook ads here and everything will be well. Well, I started working at it, and then I realized that I don't have the ability or the experience or the knowledge to move this project forward. And then it was just a very rocky road to frustration, upset, and stuck.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I went right away and found somebody to help me do it. And, you know, a lot of times people will continue to butt their head against something that they really don't have what it takes to do. And to be honest with themselves. And I don't doubt that I could learn how to be an okay Facebook advertiser eventually, but I know I'm not going to invest the time and effort for it. And I know it would be deeply frustrating, and it would take me away from what I really think about and really need to be doing here. It's that ability piece that people have to be clear of. Was there something you wanted to say there?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's not the best use of your time.
Exactly.
It's just a personal story. I mean, I remember I had a buddy from college, and we were roommates, and we lived in his grandmother's two-family, an apartment there. And I remember he liked to change the oil in his car, and he would do that on his own. And he had the tools for it and all that kind of stuff. And one time he asked me, he said, "Why don't you should change the oil in your car?" And I said, I don't really want to do that. And he said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Because I can go to a place where people do that all day, every day, and have the right tools and everything, and be out of there in a half an hour. Whereas if I were to do it by myself, it'd be the whole Saturday afternoon."
Right.
That's not how I want to spend my time. And there are plenty of other examples, but I totally get it. Everybody, and then just to piggyback on this is that, this is why we have an economy. And I sometimes bristle when I hear about, you can get all this free information online through YouTube and yada, 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 podcasts. But at some point, if you want to be doing everything yourself, then you don't get to focus on what you really want to do.
That's a really important point, John. And, there's also a big difference between knowing of and knowing how to. So you can watch a YouTube on doing brain surgery, but I certainly wouldn't want to go to somebody that learned how to do brain surgery on YouTube.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Very good point.
And I mean, that's kind of a way out there example, but there's a lot of stuff that, and to your point, that's why experts exist. And what I would want for anybody that's listening to this is to narrow down their focus so they're doing, and this takes a while, but doing just the things that they're great at and doing just the things they love. Imagine how awesome would your life be if every day you focused just on the things that made you feel really, really happy, that were legal, and the things that you really are great at. And, even for yourself, even for me, I spend time thinking about how can I eliminate the things that I may be okay at and I may not mind doing, like mowing the lawn.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But, I would much rather be talking to a coaching client, or much rather be writing something, or much rather be making a beautiful photograph than mowing the lawn.
Yeah, your photography is gorgeous. I have a couple of your photographs that you've taken and basically those are the only artworks that I have in my home office and studio. So,
thanks. I'm always, it really is. It's wonderful for me that you have them and the other people that have my work. I mean, the key thing is, how do we create a life where we can where we can really practice our gifts? Mm-hmm. Like you in this moment, when you're working in the audio, the auditory, the verbal medium, this is one of the things that you're awesome at. And it just feels right, doesn't it?
Yeah, I have a lot of fun when I'm voicing, when I'm editing audio. I mean, I I can read a waveform like it's English. You know, I mean, I can tell where different things are. I mean, when I'm in that, I'm in my element. Also, when I'm teaching or training people, either voiceover or the voiceover athlete concepts. I did a webinar with somebody. People will know who John Florian is in our audience. Did a webinar with him back in December, and I loved it. It was great. You know, and those are the things that just I get jazzed up about, you know. So yeah, I want to do more of that.
Yeah, exactly, and less of the shoveling the driveway.
Yeah, I do admit I like to cut the grass because I'm outside and I love the smell and all that kind of stuff. The shoveling the driveway, I am so done with that.
I hear you. And I used to love cutting the grass too, but I just said, you know what, there are things I'd rather do instead. But I hope people get the point here that we live in a world where we can, in many cases, find the services to get done what we need to get done so we can focus on our greatest gifts. And we can find them economically. And what I've found over the years is that when we focus on our greatest gifts and our strengths, our income tends to follow. And we're less tired. We're much happier. Life is more enjoyable. Our loved ones can appreciate us more because we're not grumpy. All that stuff.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference. So I'd have everybody think about that deeply. Do we have time for another one?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Another place that people get stuck is they don't have a personal network that helps them make things happen.
Explain that a little bit more.
Well,
You're talking about a group of friends, or?
I'm talking about a group of friends and professionals in their life that can help them make connections, that can bring them expertise, that can get them entree into special programs, and the people that can help them make things happen. And, you know, in your network, one of the things that I know about you is every time we've done a project together, like, you've got great resources that you've worked with over the years that you've built up strongly. If you want to work on your health, you have a really great trainer that you work with. Mm-hmm. And your trainer also has a good network, so if there's something you need that he can't provide, he can open up his world and make it broader. But what I find is that a lot of people don't create a network, and what they do is then they figure out that they need something, and then they're forced to just go ask somebody for a favor, and it generally doesn't work out quite as well as it could. So what I always think about is we should always be uplifting other people, and they become part of our network. And you know what my wife Debbie always says, and she says this in her Women on Fire meetings and the other stuff, she says is, you know what, give, get. And the idea is when we can uplift somebody, when we can do something for somebody, we want to do it. And we want to make sure to stay connected with them. And that way life unfolds in a different way, because if you've got the resources and connections to make stuff happen, you can move even more quickly.
No, that makes a lot of sense. As you were talking about that, something occurred to me is that when you get stuck, there's also the danger of withdrawing from your network.
That's really important.
Yeah. I mean, I may have experienced some of that myself. So can we speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I think you kind of said it all, but what happens to people is when they get stuck, they get embarrassed. If they're struggling, people withdraw. It's embarrassing not to be able to be at the top of your game. And the funny thing is, that's just the time to reach out. That's just the time to reach out more than anything. And even if it's just a reach out to say, "Hey, I'm struggling. I don't need you to do anything or change anything. I just need to tell somebody else besides my spouse that I'm struggling here."
Yeah.
And I want you to listen and maybe I could just talk to you about what my struggle is like, and you don't even have to give me advice. You can just sit with me and be with me while I talk about it and support me. And that's an important and powerful relationship to have in your life. And that's what a good friend can do for you. But I would believe that a lot of folks that are listening to us have discovered in their own nature that when they're not doing as well as they want to be, they tend to withdraw.
Yeah. Because
what happens when we're not producing at the level we're used to, it doesn't feel like us. Our identity becomes challenged. If we think of ourselves as a get-it-done kind of person, and we live that way in the world, and we're not getting it done, then it challenges our identity, and we just don't feel good about ourselves. And then we want to withdraw. And that's, as I said before, just the time when you want to turn around and reconnect and get support and have contact with other people that care about you in your network.
Right. That's good advice.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more?
Yes, please.
All right. Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is a really tough one for some folks, but it's really important. And the thing that keeps people stuck is they don't have the desire.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is the thing that they seek to accomplish is not important enough for them to do what they need to do to get it done.
Okay.
So very often if we're going to push for a goal or push for an outcome, it means we're going to have a loss somewhere else in our life. It will use our energy. It can use our time. We'll have less time to do other things. It can take away from our family. It can put us in an emotionally exposed place where we have a public chance of failing or something like that. But the idea is that your desire to do the thing has to be so strong that you're willing to do what needs to be done to make it happen. And if your desire is less strong than that, you're going to continually be stuck on your plateau. So a couple of ways to work on that. One is, of course, to get support. The other one is to really realign your goals so that they're real for you and that they're a powerful win for you if you achieve them. And that combination makes a really big difference. And that's what we want to do. We want to have this, sort of this continuous process where we're looking at our goals, we're looking at our plans, we're making sure that our goals are clear. We're making sure we have the resources, and the resources that you and I have talked about so far are a network. They are knowledge. Resources are personal energy, right? The resources, of course, time. Resource may be money, but all those things. But to continually be looking at those things and the clarity of our goals, the clarity of our plans. Do we have a plan that we can follow step by step to get to our outcome? And that combination of things is what really makes the difference between being stuck and being in motion.
That's great. A couple of things went through my mind as you were talking about this last one, and it touched upon, let me do the first thing first and then the second thing. The first thing that occurred to me was that if you've got goals, it might affect who you're hanging out with and who you're spending time with, and that might change. Which is, you were talking about a pain point in terms of they get uncomfortable. And, if you want to lose weight, you can't be hanging out in the bar, drinking beers and eating buffalo wings every night. If you want to get it in shape, that's not the environment. But if all your friends, that's what they do, you're going to be spending less time with them because you want to go in a different direction, I think is a pretty simple example.
Yes.
The other thing that occurred to me is that they don't have enough, when you said people don't have enough desire, I think desire can change over time. And the last episode of the podcast, I talked about businesses evolving and how things change. What becomes important to you changes. And the example I used was somebody saying, I don't have the same haircut I had 10 years ago. So if things aren't, all these things change over time. I'm not wearing the same clothes I had 10 years ago. So if those aspects of your life are changing, your business is naturally going to do that. And I know personally, my goals as a voiceover person have changed. And at some point, I think, I worked so hard, and again, I'll just use myself as an example, worked so hard to get to where I am currently. And once you achieve a goal, you're kind of like, okay, now what? And it's great, and you ride that for a while. But then for me personally, it's like, okay, now what? And I don't want to disrespect all the effort that I put in to achieve the goal. But it's at some point you're emotionally saying, okay, this is great. I've done this, but now I want something more or something else. Is there something wrong with those emotions? And is it natural? And how do you move on? And how do you give yourself permission to go, now I want to do something different? Am I making sense?
You're making complete sense. Well, we could think of that as goal dissatisfaction a little bit. It's not really, but it's, I've spoken to people that say, my dream is to have a Volkswagen Beetle, and they get a Volkswagen Beetle, and then a year later I go, hey, how are you loving your Beetle? Well, I got the Beetle. I'm kind of tired of it, right?
Yeah.
And so now I'm looking for a Mustang XYZ, and they go through the same cycle. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I think on some level, I don't know. It's almost like, is it, you've worked, so I'll just use myself as an example. So I became a production director. I produce commercials. I voice commercials. I edit them. And it's like, I've been doing this for a long time now. And it's like, okay. And I don't want to sound ungrateful and unappreciative of what I have. But at the same time, it's like, do I really want to be doing this when I'm 65? And the answer is no, but at the same time you say, I worked so hard to get here. I don't want to dishonor all of that work and effort and appear ungrateful. And is it okay for me to move on and evolve and do something different? And will I appear ungrateful if I move in a completely different direction or just a slightly different direction? Am I missing out? Am I not appreciating fully what I have right now? Am I not maxing out what I have right now? Is there something I'm missing?
Got it. Well, that's really, that is a little bit different than what I was talking about. So this is fairly important, and you know what, I want to honor you for all you've achieved. And we are hopefully evolving, growing, progressing, moving forward. So the thing that we've learned how to do up to now is the stepping stone for our next step in our life. So everything that we've ever done goes into making us the person we are and the person that we are today. And the question is, what's our evolution going to look like? Because we're always building and gathering and taking what we've done before forward with us. I was thinking this morning about my first job ever. Mm-hmm. And, my first job ever, I used to build these electronic circuits for people. And I was thinking this morning, you know what? I'm so grateful I got to do that, because that job has stayed with me today. Everything I learned at that job is still with me today. The experiences I had, the people I met, and the soldering iron burns that I got, they're all still with me. And so my thought for you, and for anybody that's listening and thinking this, is we're never at a stopping place. I think that our purpose here on earth is to fully express our gifts. And it's just like being, a real musician. Real musicians are always working on their craft, and artists are always evolving. If you follow the career of any artist, and, Picasso's an easy target, and whether people like or don't like his work, it changed continuously, but it was always art.
Right.
And
okay.
The one thing I know about you is that whether or not you're doing the job you're doing now, whether or not you are working, you're still going to be using most of the same tools and talents that you developed over your career.
And I brought that up because I know other people are feeling that way. They're saying, okay, is this okay? I mean, am I just tossing aside something that I've worked hard? And I'm not abandoning voiceover and production and all that in any way.
No, of course not.
But I guess a lot of our identity gets wrapped up in what we do.
There's nobody, I don't believe there's a universal force that's judging whether you stay with whatever your current role is, that's going to get you. But what I do believe is that there is a universal force of some sort that would be disappointed if you didn't take your talents, which are really huge, to the limit. And if that means moving on from whatever you're doing, that means dropping something, it means adding something else, then you know what? It's almost your responsibility to fully engage what you can do. And, I've seen you over 8 years as we've talked about, and the amount of information you've learned, the things that you've done, the things you've created, the successes you've had have been extraordinary. And they've all built on what you love, and they've all built on an expression of your gifts. And so I think that it would be a shame for you to ever not move forward because you felt like you weren't being grateful.
Right.
Just the opposite. I feel like you have real talent in so many areas that it would be tragic for you not to fully express everything that you can with the energy and time you have in your life.
And that's a collective you, not just me.
That's for everybody. And I was thinking about everybody that's listening to us, and I've never run into somebody that doesn't have gifts.
Right.
What I run into all the time are people that don't honor their gifts. That's the sad part.
Yeah, that's kind of tragic. What is everyone else missing out on that you could have shared with us, you know?
Exactly.
Well, Rob, I mean, we've spent a good amount of time talking about this, and I think we touched on everything that I had mentioned in our emails when we were setting up this interview. Rob, I just want to thank you. Thank you for spending time and sharing your insights. You deal with a lot of people, so you have a broad spectrum of experiences that you can share with us, and I want to thank you for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure. I always enjoy our conversations, John. I'm always very grateful to do the work I do because I'm dedicated to people, and hopefully everyone on the call has heard it, dedicated to people really expressing their gifts. And that's what I do this work for.
Our program originates in the Boston studios. We hope you'll join us again. Until then, we bid you au revoir, keep your chin up, and the best of luck.
Well, that's it for this episode of the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com so you'll get notices of new episodes, and please share it with your friends and colleagues in the voiceover world. Also, it would be a huge help if you'd like this podcast and rate it on iTunes to help keep it near the top of the list. Feel free to share your comments and questions about this episode and future topics you'd like discussed at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com. And if you'd like more information on one-on-one coaching where we focus on growing your business, feel free to drop me a line at my cyber assistant's email address at mike@johnmelly.com. Thanks for listening. Now go out there and share your voice